like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Democrats are not going to win if we have a nominee who has a history of hiding his tax returns, of harassing women, and of supporting racist policies like redlining and stop and frisk.
Holy moly, that's Elizabeth Warren taking off the gloves this week in a Democratic presidential primary debate. That just got started. It was even more brutal after that. Joining us now via Skype to talk about it is our friend Joel Pollak, the senior editor-at-large at Breitbart.com. Joel, you were there. It was shocking on TV. I see that had the highest debate ratings of any Democratic debate, I think, ever. Not hard to see why. It was truly gloves off.
It was. I think the ratings were high because people wanted to see Mike Bloomberg. They wanted to see the new entrant into the field. And I also think they were anticipating this kind of a fight. Bernie Sanders had been hinting at it for days, that this was a billionaire trying to come in and take control of the party. And if there was one thing you knew about Bernie Sanders, it's that he would not stand for a billionaire buying out the presidential election. So I think this was a highly anticipated fight, virtually on the eve of the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder heavyweight boxing championship in Las Vegas, which happens on Saturday evening, and very much in that style. Right out of the gate, Elizabeth Warren jabbed Michael Bloomberg right between the eyes. And to his credit, he stayed on his feet. He got in a few good punches of his own, particularly at the expense of Sanders, noting later on that what a wonderful country America is because the best-known socialist in America has 3 houses and is a millionaire.
I think we've got a clip of that. Let's play that right now. It's quite something. Obviously, he had been keeping that powder dry, but he really delivered it well. Here, let's take a look.
Creating a government that works for all, not just for
What a wonderful country we have. The best-known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What I miss here?
Well, you'll miss that I work in Washington, House 1.
That's the first problem.
Live in Burlington, House 2.
That's good.
And like thousands of other Vermonters, I do have a summer camp. Forgive me for that. Where is your home? Which tax haven do you have your home?
New York City, thank you very much, and I pay all my taxes.
You know what? I think a lot of Democrat pundits, thought Michael Bloomberg was not quite prepared, not ready for obvious questions that were coming his way. My theory is that when you're worth $60 billion and the president of a company that's named after you, you don't have a lot of skeptics or dissidents in your world. Everyone's sort of a yes man. It's been a while since he's been mayor of New York, where everyone's a critic. I think maybe he just wasn't ready for the rough and tumble. What, am I overstating how poorly he did?
There's another argument, which is that he actually did exactly what he needed to do. Now, this is not a view I share, but it is a pretty good argument, which is that all he needed to do is draw out the worst in the other candidates and survive. The only person who he did not manage to draw into a confrontation was Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg remained focused on Bernie Sanders. And I thought that showed some smart thinking on his part, because Bloomberg is not on the ballot on Saturday when the people of Nevada, in the Democratic Party at least, go to vote in their caucuses. He's also not on the ballot in South Carolina. Now, you might think it's kind of dumb for Bloomberg to go on stage before a caucus or a primary where the result is going to be he loses with 0% of the vote. That was my thinking. But Buttigieg understands that Bloomberg may be around for a while, and his real challenge is actually Bernie Sanders. Sanders is the front runner, and Buttigieg is trying to say, look, I'm the real alternative to Sanders. I'm not going to waste my time attacking Michael Bloomberg. I'll leave that to the others, but I'm going to go after the front runner. All the other candidates spent their time attacking Michael Bloomberg, and he was able, in a sense, to make them all look angry. So perhaps, this is the argument, perhaps he actually did win the debate because he will be around again next week. Then he's around on Super Tuesday when all the other candidates have essentially punched themselves out, all of them except Pete Buttigieg, who, despite whatever other flaws he has as a candidate, is running a very polished campaign. He is running all over the state of Nevada. He's appearing in communities everywhere. He's doing everything you would need to do to win the state. Not polling very well, though, because I don't think people are warming to his message, which is rather elusive. It's almost an Obama-type hopey-changey message 12 years after the fact. So it's not really clear what he stands for, and I think that's fundamentally his problem. But he is running an incredibly well-organized and disciplined campaign, and you saw that there in the debate. But Sanders and Bloomberg came to fight, and Sanders especially, and you can see he really let Bloomberg get under his skin very early on, as well as Buttigieg. When Buttigieg was attacking Sanders, Sanders almost flew into a rage on stage, and I think that was Bloomberg's goal. He was trying to get everybody to look angry, unhinged, lacking the leadership temperament, and he kept his cool. He knew that a lot of this was coming. He didn't dispute some of it. Some of it, by the way, I don't think was actually correct. Some of the attacks against him weren't 100% factually correct. He just withstood it and delivered his message. There was one thing he did very poorly, which was on the issue of women making accusations inside of his company and the non-disclosure agreements he made them sign. That was very poorly handled. You know, Trump would have handled that very differently. And Bloomberg allowed
I agree. I thought that was, he looked so bad. Here, let's play a clip of it just so our viewers know what you're talking about.
For sexual harassment and for gender discrimination in the workplace. So, Mr. Mayor, are you willing to release all of those women from those non-disclosure agreements so we can hear their side of the story?
We have a very few non-disclosure agreements.
How many is that?
Let me finish.
How many is that?
None of them accuse me of doing anything other than maybe they didn't like the joke I told. And let me put, there's agreements between two parties that wanted to keep it quiet, and that's up to them. They signed those agreements, and we'll live with it.
So wait, when you say it is up to, I just want to be clear. Some is how many? And when you say they signed them and they wanted them, if they wish now to speak out and tell their side of the story about what it is they allege, that's now okay with you? You're releasing them on television tonight?
Senator? No.
Is that right?
I thought that was pretty bad. I mean, it looked bad. I don't know what the truth beneath it is, but it looks bad. What do you think, Joel?
I thought it was very poor debating form for him to be drawn into that subject. He ought to have said, there's nothing here. I'd like to know the truth about Elizabeth Warren's investment in the fossil fuel industry, or I'd like to know about how she flipped houses and took advantage of people who went bankrupt. You know, he had to counter with something, instead of which he gave them more information that they could use in subsequent attacks.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show, which is a show I do every day. I do a monologue, interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at premium.rebelnews.com.